Hey friends, this is Mrs. Mancuso. I've been thinking of you all and I hope you're doing well, but I was thinking about this book and that you might enjoy hearing this. This was one of my children's favorite books. It's called The Ox Cart Man by Donald Hall. The illustrator is Barbara Cooney. This book is about how families who lived a long, long time ago, in a time even before there were cars or telephones, how those families earned money and how they bought things that they needed. The Ox Cart Man. I gave this book to my son, Ben, in Christmas of 2000. He was about 6 years old, so he is 26 now. It was one of his favorite books. There's the farm. In October, he backed his ox into his cart, and he and his family filled it up with everything they made or grew all year long that was left over. He packed a bag of wool he sheared from the sheep in April. He packed a shawl his wife wove on a loom, from yarn spun at the spinning wheel, from sheep sheared in April. He packed 5 pairs of mittens his daughter knit from yarn spun at the spinning wheel, from sheep sheared in April. He packed the candles the family made. He packed linen from flax they grew. He packed shingles he split himself. He packed birch brooms his son carved with a borrowed kitchen knife. He packed potatoes they dug from the garden, but first he counted out enough potatoes to eat all winter and potatoes for seed next spring. He packed his barrel of apples, honey and honeycombs, turnips and cabbages, a wooden box of maple sugar from the maples they tapped in March. When they boiled and boiled and boiled the sap away, he packed a bag of goose feathers his children collected from the barnyard geese. When his cart was full, he waved goodbye to his wife, his daughter, and his son. And he walked at his ox's head 10 days, over hills, through valleys, by streams, past farms and villages. Until he came to Portsmouth and Portsmouth Market. He sold the bag of wool. He sold the shawl his wife made. He sold 5 pairs of mittens. He sold candles and shingles. He sold birch brooms. He sold potatoes. He sold apples. He sold honey and honeycombs, turnips and cabbages. He sold maple sugar. He sold a bag of goose feathers. Then he sold the wooden box he carried the maple sugar in. Then he sold the barrel he carried the apples in. Then he sold the bag he carried the potatoes in. Then he sold his ox cart. Then he sold his ox and kissed him goodbye on the nose. Then he sold his ox's yoke and harness. With his pockets full of coins, he walked through the Portsmouth market. He bought an iron kettle to hang over the fire at home, and for his daughter he bought an embroidery needle that came from a boat in the harbor that had sailed all the way from England. And for his son he bought a Barlow knife for carving birch brooms with. And for the whole family he bought 2 pounds of wintergreen peppermint candies. Then he walked home with the needle and the knife and the wintergreen peppermint candies tucked into the kettle, a stick over his shoulder stuck through the kettle's handle, and coins still in his pocket. There he goes. Past farms and villages, over hills, through valleys by streams, until he came to his farm, and his son, his daughter, and his wife were waiting for him. And his daughter took her needle and began stitching. And his son took his Barlow knife and started whittling. And they cooked dinner in their new kettle. And afterward, everyone enjoyed a wintergreen peppermint candy. And that night, the ox cart man sat in front of his fire, stitching new harness for the young ox in the barn. And he carved a new yoke and sawed planks for a new cart and split shingles all winter. While his wife made flax into linen all winter, and his daughter embroidered linen all winter, and his son carved brooms made from birch all winter, and everybody made candles. And in March, they tapped the maple trees and boiled the sap down. In April, they sheared the sheep, spun yarn, and wove and knitted. And in May, they planted potatoes, turnips, and cabbages, while apple blossoms bloomed and fell. While bees woke up and started to make new honey. And geese squawked in the barnyard, dropping feathers as soft as clouds. Boys and girls, let's go back and look at this story one more time. This man has an ox. Oxen are very big, and he has this cart. Oxen are also very, very strong. They spent the winter weaving shawls and knitting mittens that came from the wool that came off from these sheep. The family made candles, and they made something called linen. Flax is a plant. It grows tall, a little bit like very tall grass. And after you work with it a bit, you can weave it into a very fine cloth. It's very cool and nice in the summer. And you notice that their little son there has made brooms to sell. He's made them out of birch wood, which makes a great broom. But he used an old borrowed kitchen knife to make them, which might not work so well. They've packed barrels of apples and turnips and cabbages. Those are vegetables and fruits that last well into the winter and travel very well. And the whole family made candles, probably out of beeswax. He had to walk a long way because, as I said before, they didn't have any cars. This is Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and you can actually go there, and these buildings that are in this drawing are really there, and you can see them. My husband and I have been there, and it's a beautiful place. You can see the sea there, and people would set up a cart or a little booth and sell things that people needed. They didn't have grocery stores. So this man sells everything. He even sells the cart because he can make a new cart. And he sells his ox. The first time I read this, that kind of bothered me, that he would sell his ox. And then he goes and he buys some things for his children and his wife and for himself. His daughter gets an embroidery needle from England. So it was probably a very fine needle with a very sharp point that would help her do better embroidery. Embroidery is a kind of pretty stitching on cloth. This is a little bit of embroidery here on this seat cover. This knife is called a Barlow knife, and it's all the way from England. And believe it or not, Barlow still makes beautiful knives, and they're very good if you want to carve wood with them. And then he walks home, all the way home. Remember, his family hasn't seen him for probably a month now. They're probably so happy to have Dad back home. What's in the barn here? Looks like a baby ox. So maybe when the next October comes around, that baby ox will be ready to pull a new cart. He's making a new yoke for the oxen to fit over his shoulders, and he's going to make a new cart to replace the old one. He'll probably make a new wooden box for the maple sugar and new barrels for the apples. Here's that flax I was telling you about, that plant that you can make into cloth. And you see his daughter embroidering pretty flowers onto cloth. She might make curtains or something out of that. Here they are making maple syrup. We've eaten a lot of pancakes since I've been at home here and not in school because I've had more time to make them, and we love to have maple syrup poured on top of them. Notice how the children are helping with all of that work. It looks like kind of fun work, though. It's the daughter helping with the trees, and the son carrying firewood. They're outdoors in the fresh air. And here is the daughter helping hold the sheep while they're being sheared. Shearing the sheep doesn't hurt the sheep at all. In fact, they kind of like to get all that heavy, hot wool off from them. Look how skinny they look after they're wool's been taken all off. It's kind of funny. And the family's growing some new plants. The kids look pretty happy to be working and helping. These geese are dropping more feathers, and geese feathers and geese down is very, very soft. They're very soft, and people would use them to stuff into blankets or quilts to help keep them warm. I hope you enjoyed the Ox Cart Man as much as my son does. And keep reading, boys and girls. Love you, and I'll see you soon.